Hey guys, Vlad here with AVT-Astro, and tonight I've got a special treat for you guys, and that is how to clean the corrector plate on an SCT telescope. Now, there's probably plenty of videos on YouTube on how to do this. I haven't watched them all. Most of them, I'm sure, kind of cover how to clean just the outside of your corrector plate. On this particular scope, which we'll kind of see in a second why, we're actually going to take the corrector plate out and clean the outside and the inside of it. So stay tuned. Alright, so and for those of you that might not be familiar, again, my name is Vlad. I run a little astro blog called AVT-Astro.com, and of course this YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing for more cool videos like this. Basically, if you're wondering, why I'm making this video and what makes me qualified to do this, so I used to volunteer a lot at the telescope workshop, basically at my club's place where we kind of worked on telescopes. I was kind of like the SCT, cleaning guy. And hopefully with the, when the pandemic, kind of ends, I'll kind of resume doing that. But anyway, I've cleaned, I'd say probably at least 25 corrector plates between my personal scopes and, club scopes and just like, club members, telescopes and that type of deal. So anyhow, let's check out what's going on with this guy. Alrighty, so the scope that we're working on tonight is a C11 SCT. Let me try to see if I could pull off this cover without dropping the scope. Boom, there she is. Alright, so basically, I kind of wanted to show this, hopefully. It's shown pretty well here on camera. Kind of like, some things to look for, when you might want to clean the corrector plate. So the camera's picking up, like all of the little dust and stuff, on the corrector pretty well. Try to zoom in here. So, a lot of people, back when I used to volunteer at the, at the telescope workshop with the club, they'll see a dusty corrector plate like this, right? And, they think that it's kind of the end of the world. Having a little bit of dust like this really will not affect the view at all. And most of this can probably be blown off with the bulb, which we'll actually do in a minute. Now, the reason that this corrector plate actually needs to be cleaned is, I don't know if these are showing up pretty well. So I'm going to try to point these out with my finger. See this right here? These guys here and these here, and they're kind of all over the corrector, but those are actually little mold spores that are actually growing on the inside of the corrector, and that you definitely don't want. And that's why we're actually gonna take out the corrector plate completely out of the OTA to clean it, because we actually need to clean the inside of it. And we'll do the outside too, because there's a few fingerprints on here. Nothing too bad though. So anyhow, yeah, let's check out the equipment that you need to do the job to kind of complete this. So here's the goodies that we're going to need. You're going to need a marker, a Sharpie, and you'll see why in a minute. If you're actually pulling out the corrector plate. If you're just doing the outside of the corrector, you don't need that. Gloves, these are like, soft cotton gloves. If you're really kind of like scared about touching your corrector or damaging it, these are a good idea. I usually don't wear them. This is not just alcohol. This is actually a lens cleaning solution. You can use whatever you want. This is kind of like one that I derived myself that I used. It's mostly pretty much what Teleview recommends on their website for cleaning like eyepieces and stuff. Cotton balls, lots and lots of cotton balls. These are Q-tips, and these are actually these are like cosmetic type of Q-tips. So on one side they have a very sharp point, right, and then on the other side they're kind of like a flat point. I usually don't really use the flat too much, but these sharp points are really neat to have. So those are great. And another cosmetic item, these are basically like a really, I don't know, like a 2 inch by 3 inch or so, large cotton pad which is actually great for, you know, using on the corrector plate a lot of times to do basically like the final wipe so you don't have any streaks or anything like that. So now that you kind of saw all the equipment, all the good, oh, and then a screwdriver, and that's for taking out the screws, you know, when we're removing the corrector. Let's get to pulling out the corrector plate. Oh, you know what? I just realized I don't even have my bulb out here, the one they used to blow off dust, so I'll grab one of those too. Alrighty guys, so here's the scope set up, right? And actually, so you can set it up, basically you want the corrector plate to be kind of pointed up, you know, you don't want it to be horizontal, you know, if you could avoid it. So I've just got it, you know, kind of propped it up on my couch here, right? So that works pretty well. You could also put it on the mount, and I've done that plenty of times, especially if you have a GM mount, that works pretty well to get it pointed vertically. Having that at an angle like this a little bit is not a bad thing at all. So anyhow, we're gonna get to start to doing the cleaning. The very first thing you always want to do when you're working on optics is, this is the thing that I didn't have on the table before, but you want to take a bulb and just try to get as much of the dust as you can. And I'm seeing some of this stuff, I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, I'm seeing some of it fly off. Some of the specks are still on there, which is totally fine. Now, for those of you that are just going to be cleaning the outside of the corrector plate, I'm actually going to show you how I do it without removing the corrector, just so you kind of have a basis for how to do that. And then we'll actually pull the corrector and do the back of it. Normally, like if I was just doing this normally, I wouldn't really do the outside with it mounted on here. I'd just pull and do the inside and the outside, with it pulled off. But for the sake of this video, we'll start with just, cleaning the outside, just so you kind of see how to do that. All right, so I've got a bag of cotton balls here that, and we're going to be using a ton of these guys. You just want regular pure cotton balls. Pretty much any store will sell these. So what you want to do when you're starting out, right, is, you take your cleaning solution. You'll put a little bit of on that, you don't need to like drench the cotton ball or anything, just put some of it on there. And basically, depending on how dirty your corrector is, chances are, unless it's already really clean, in which case you probably shouldn't even be cleaning your corrector. But if it's got like dust and stuff that doesn't want to come off, what you want to do is actually, you take one cotton ball, right, and you don't want to go in circular motions on the corrector plate. What you want to do is you start either from here or here. I typically start with where the secondary is and the wipe in. So you do one line, so you'll do one wipe, right? Like so. Oh my God, we're touching the corrector plate, right? All right, so you do one wipe, right? And then, you'd figure, well, hey, this cotton ball is good, right? Can I use it again? If your corrector plate's fairly clean, if you're not super obsessed with, potentially, 1 in a trillion causing damage to your corrector, you could just throw this away, and that's what I usually do, especially if the corrector's pretty dirty. In this case, I've actually got like these jumbo cotton balls. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit more cleaning solution, like not on the same side, it's the side that I wipe with, on the other side basically, and do another wipe. And so anyhow, I'm going to do that to the whole corrector plate. I'm going to speed up the video real quick, but I'll still keep it rolling just so you kind of see how the process works here. All right, now that I'm kind of getting to the last couple of swipes here, all right, we've done, most of the corrector already. I don't know if you noticed in the video, so when I'm swiping, right, I don't try to go just, straight down. What I try to do is I try to swipe and turn at the same time. And the reason that you want to do that is because that way, if you happen to catch something that's hard, that's going to scratch, potentially your corrector plate, you're actually kind of like churning the cotton ball to where you have a new piece of the cotton ball contacting essentially all the time. So you're not just gonna put like a long, you know, big scratch on your corrector, which, you know, that wouldn't be good. The other thing that I wanted to mention is you're not really putting a lot of pressure on this. There's really no reason to do that. You're just kind of using essentially the weight of the cotton ball base to swipe it. Alright, so now I wanted to grab the camera and kind of show you where we're at, right? So right now what we've got is a ton of lens, you know, cleaner on there, right? So if you let it just dry like this, in fact, you know, some of the areas are already drying. Like, see how there's like the, you know, basically wipe marks on there? That's how your corrector is going to look like if you let it dry. Which, you know, it probably won't affect the view at all, but you know, you probably won't want that. So what you do typically at this point, right, is what you'll want to do is you'll grab a cotton swab, and you actually want to, you know, kind of keep, you know, and at this point you should have already taken off most of the, you know, like bad particulates or whatever. So you don't really have to use, you know, like a new cotton ball for every swipe, but, you know, I kind of throw them away fairly often. But anyhow, what you want to do is you want to get rid of this excess cleaning solution with just dry cotton balls, right? Okay. So we're going to do that. And a lot of this stuff's already dry just because, you know, I'm trying to shoot this video and kind of show you. Normally I'd really try to get as much of this off as possible before it dries to kind of prevent the spotting and stuff. But chances are you're going to have some of that going on anyway. But that's not a big deal, and I'll show you guys how to kind of take care of that. Okay, so we got pretty much all the fluid off, right? So we are pretty good to go, and you're like, wait a second, Vlad. The corrector looks terrible still, right? Because there's all this cotton, you know, fiber on there. That's not a big deal at all. I'll show you guys in a second of how to get rid of that. You're not really worried about that right now. What you're worried about, you know, especially if you're kind of anal like me, is, yeah, it's kind of showing up. It's kind of hard to show in the video, but like there's wipe marks, right? And then there's actually, yeah, you kind of see it, like these little spots right here. Those are the water spots from basically the fluid drying. So the way that you want to kind of, you know, get rid of that, if you really, you know, want to, is basically what you do is you put a little bit of your breath on there, right? So you go like this. And then it actually, you know, it'll actually show you the marks even better, right? And then essentially what you do is you kind of like, you know, almost like buff the surface, right? You're not buffing though. You're not trying to put a lot of pressure on it or anything like that. But, you know, putting a little bit of water on there and kind of doing that will really make a big difference. And when I say water, I mean water with your breath, with how the final product looks like. I mean, like that little area that I just did is spotless right now, besides what's going on the inside of the corrector, which we're about to get to. So anyhow, I'm going to grab the bulb now. And at this point, we're assuming that you just did that to the whole corrector. You're pretty happy with what it looks like. It doesn't have any of the cleaning marks on it. All you've got is the lint, you know, from like the cotton balls that you're using. So at this point, what you do is you just kind of blow that stuff right off. Most of it will come off. Some of it, you know, like this guy here, right? Oh, I was going to say it's not blown off, but it did blow off. So anyway, most of the stuff will just blow right off with the bulb. If it doesn't blow off with the bulb, what you want to do is use one of those cotton pads that I was talking about, one of these guys here, because these do not lint. So what you'd want to do is if you grab one of these, right, and if you know, if it really bothers you to have like that little bit less of lint on there, you just grab one of these guys, lay it flat, and this should wipe off pretty much any of the residual cotton that you know you might have on there. So if you were doing the corrector plate from just the outside, you know, after you do that procedure, right, you're basically done at this point. You should have a very clean corrector. You might have a little bit of lint, you know, remaining on there, but that's not a big deal at all. You know, it's just going to happen, you know, when you're using cotton balls, but you know, it should be very, very minimal though. It's definitely not going to affect the view. Now we're going to get into how you actually pull the corrector plate out if you were going to clean the inside of it as well, or if you needed to clean the inside of it. Alright, so pulling the corrector plate is not rocket science on one of these. It's just, you know, it is kind of, I mean, I guess it can be nerve-wracking because you're dealing with a corrector plate that if this thing breaks or you scratch it, you know, your scope is pretty much more or less ruined. You really can't replace these things. So you do want to be careful. There isn't anything like, you know, too hard about it though. So if you're, you know, pretty confident in your abilities to do it, just follow the procedure. It's pretty, you know, fairly easy to do. On pretty much any SCT that's a non-Celestron Edge HD scope, the Edge HD scopes actually have the corrector plate. Essentially, they're like bonded. It's I think they use like either a heavy-duty caulk or like some kind of glue to hold the corrector plate. So if you have one of those scopes, you know, I've actually tried to pull the corrector on one of those, and you know, I'm pretty fearless when it comes to this procedure. But even I had to quit because, you know, I was trying to cut that bond or whatever, and I just felt like I was going to destroy the corrector plate, and you know, if I didn't stop. So if you have one of those scopes that has the bonded corrector, and that's from all the scopes that I've done, only the new Celestron Edge HD models have them. If you have that, I honestly wouldn't even try to pull it. It's just not worth your while. But any of the older like meads, or not older, but any mead that I've encountered, and the older Celestrons that are non-Edge HD, it's pretty simple procedure, and let's get to it. So basically, the first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna take off all the screws that hold this little ring on. This ring can go on any way. I usually, before I pull it off, I take a picture of it just to make sure that I get the orientation right. I can't do that right now because the camera that I'd normally do that with is my cell phone, which is recording this video. But I have the video, so just in case you know, I need to see how the orientation is. But I know that, so the dovetail plate is down here, the Celestron logo is up here too, so you know, it's pretty easy to remember. But usually I do take a picture just to make sure I put it on, you know, the same way. So what you do is you start taking off the screws. And, you know, this isn't rocket science again, but do keep in mind that, you know, if your screwdriver like slips or, you know, hits the corrector, it probably will scratch it. So you do want to be careful. I wouldn't really use power tools for this. I just don't think it's worth the risk, you know, I just do it manually. So you go in here, you grab the screw. Once you unscrew it, and, you know, you just kind of set them aside. And again, I'll speed up the video. Alrighty, so now we got the ring totally loose, right? All the screws are gone. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna, you know, you just use your fingernail, you reach in there and you pick up the ring, right? And that will just come right out. There are these little two tabs that, you know, are for the dust cap to capture, so you might have to flex it a little bit to kind of clear those. So just like that. And So the ring's out, right? But I'm gonna flip this over and kind of show you on this side. So this one, it has like this little like felt gasket here, and one of these gaskets actually stayed behind. So you want to lift that thing out and kind of set it, you know, aside with the ring. And it looks like, you know, I mean, you could tell the way that it went because it has the holes for the screws. So it was in there like this. Alright guys, so I forgot to mention, so this, before you unscrew this, you definitely want the scope to be vertical. You do not want it to be horizontal because there's nothing preventing the corrector plate at this point from tipping out if it was horizontal. So, you know, do make sure that it's, you know, at least somewhat vertical. Okay, and another thing that's very, very crucial before you move this thing in any shape or form, that's where the Sharpie comes in. You actually need to mark the orientation of the corrector plate to the OTA because these are set at the factory in a certain orientation to correct the image of the scope, you know, as best as this corrector plate can with the mirror. So some of these I've taken apart and they've got marks already, either from the factory or maybe somebody that actually knew what they were doing actually has taken it out. A lot of them will not have marks, and let's see. As far as I can see, this one does not have marks. So we are going to actually make marks. Now, so the way that you do the marks, right, is you take your Sharpie and you're going to draw a line between like this outer, you know, like edge of the ring and onto the corrector plate. You're like, oh my God, you know, you're drawing on your corrector plate. Well, you got to keep in mind the ring, right? Like this guy here, it blocks, you know, like this much of the corrector anyway. So it's, you know, it's not going to be visible and it's not going to affect the corrector at all. Technically, just one mark will do you. I usually do 2 marks just because that way when I'm realigning it, I could align it a little bit more accurately, I feel. So where, you know, you just, you know, pick wherever you want to make them. We'll make them kind of towards the top just because it's easier to remember. And that camera light is making this kind of more difficult. So I'm going to have to use my left hand here to do this. So I've got 1 mark in. I don't know if it's showing up on camera. I mean, I could clearly see that mark. It's very easy to see on both the corrector plate and on the OTA. And then I'm making a 2nd mark. I just did them kind of right by each other. And yeah, they're aligned, you know, they're aligned very well. I could tell exactly how this corrector plate is meant to be in this OTA. So now we're going to get to the crucial step of pulling the sucker out of the OTA. I've done this a lot of times. Sometimes, especially if it's an older scope, you know, they could have a tendency to stick a little bit. Depending on which model you have, this is kind of a crucial thing too. Sometimes with some of the older models, they use essentially like cork type of material as spacers, right, to space out the corrector plate. If you have that, what I'd actually do is I'd take your Sharpie, right, and I'd mark the corks with where they go into the OTA as well, because you really do want to put this back as close to the way as it came from the factory. This particular model is a newer one, and it actually has like these little plastic tabs that space it out, so I don't have to worry about that. Those corks are kind of a nightmare a lot of times because, you know, when you pull the corrector, they'll all just kind of fall everywhere. So, you know, if you have them, you know, try to kind of take this out as best as you can without having them fall everywhere. Sometimes they will, they just can't really do anything about it. That's why marking where they go is kind of important. But anyhow, yeah, I'm gonna get to pulling this sucker out, and you know, we'll get to cleaning it. With this particular model, with the newer one, with no corks or anything, it's pretty simple, really. So what I usually do is I grab a, you know, this one is the faster model that has this really big ring here. Pretty easy to do. Some of the smaller ones, they're kind of harder to do it, you know, but essentially what you do is you grab it, and usually I put 2 hands on just in case. So that was kind of the nerve-wracking part, right? So you kind of saw, there was a little bit of resistance. I mean, that sucker was in there pretty tight, right? But anyhow, yeah, you just pull it out and, there it is. So you could hold it by this, I mean, if you had to in an emergency, you could grab it by the plate, but then you're going to have fingerprints, you're going to have to clean that off. But basically, you could hold this then by either this ring here, or there's this bigger kind of, light baffle, I guess, that you could hold it by as well. So there she is. I mean, pretty simple. Alright guys, so now that we got the corrector plate out, this is a sealed system, so there shouldn't really be any dust going in there. So what I usually do is I just cap with the dust cap, because I don't, I don't want anything to get on the primary mirror. By the way, generally speaking, when you get this thing cracked open, right, you might be tempted to clean the primary mirror. Don't do it. It's again, it's a sealed system. Chances are that thing is as clean as it's going to be. There's really not really a good way of cleaning the primary mirror. I've done it once in a scope that really needed it, and it was, it was really hairy to do it while it's inside the scope. Without taking the whole scope apart and taking the primary mirror out, there's really no way of doing it. So, whatever you might see on the primary mirror that you think that needs to be cleaned, trust me, I would not touch it unless, you're an expert, and you're probably not watching this video anyway. Alrighty guys, so here's the corrector out safe and sound. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean, the back side of this. And the way that we're going to do that is, there's the secondary mirror, by the way, which looks nice and clean. Kind of curious on camera, it's actually showing up as, kind of having a little bit of film, but it's actually pretty cool. I'm trying to manage the camera and the corrector plate here. But basically, so to do the underside, so you just set it down just like so, right? And you do the same procedure as we did on the outside to the inside. I will say for those of you guys that might be more advanced users, there is actually a way of actually removing this whole assembly from the corrector plate. Basically, this thing just unscrews, right? That's a little bit more technical to do. I've done that before on previous scopes that really needed it, just because this thing was just really filthy. And I actually kind of washed it, more of like how you do a primary mirror on a daub. So watch my daub video if you want to try to wash it like that, to where you just totally submerge it in water. But for most cases, you really don't need that. With this one, I'm not going to take it apart and show it to you. If there's enough interest, I could do that in the future, basically YouTube video, but yeah. Alrighty guys, so finished product. I just, finished cleaning this whole thing up. We are ready to install it back into the OTA out there. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Just quick notes, if there's a little bit of dust on the secondary mirror there, while you have this out, it's not a bad idea to blow that off. I definitely get as much dust off as you can. If there's some dust on the primary mirror and the OTA, you can hit it with the blower. Again, do not do anything besides, the blower on both the primary and the secondary mirrors, unless you're an expert, and again, chances are you're not watching this video then. So let me put the camera back on the tripod and we'll set this sucker back into place. Alrighty guys, so easy peasy, you just take your dust cap off. Again, if there's some dust in there on the primary mirror, blow it off. This one's clean, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah, basically, procedure is pretty much the same as removing it. So you grab your corrector plate, right, and then you find the marks. So my marks are right there. I know that they're roughly up. You find where the marks were on the OTA. Alright, so the marks are right here on my OTA. I see the two marks, so I'm going to set this in here just like it was from the factory. So, I'm going to do the bottom first and kind of slide the top in while I'm aligning the marks. Okay. So So that popped in. My marks are exactly, aligned, and at this point, all there is to it is just to put the ring back on and screw the screws in, and I won't bore you guys with that. But anyhow, hopefully you guys found this video helpful if you're thinking about cleaning your corrector plate. Not too much to it if you're doing the outside of it. Just don't use a lot of pressure, don't use too much liquid so it doesn't like leak inside or anything like that. Otherwise, you really can't mess it up. If you're doing the inside of it and you're actually pulling it out, it's a little bit more technical. It's not super hard to do though. The primary thing is, make sure you mark it so that you're putting it back in the way that it came out. Most of the time, they pop out fairly easily. This one was actually kind of hard. There was a little bit of pressure there. If you're dealing with corks, removing it and putting it back in is a little bit more tedious because you have to align the corks correctly. So that, it's kind of a bummer. But with the newer OTAs, you kind of don't have to deal with that like with this guy. So anyhow, if you guys have any questions, comments, or anything like that, I'll leave them in the thing below. If you're not subscribed, please do consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.